Nico.
Good morning. Welcome to our panel discussion with the CIOs. I hope everybody brought a brown bag lunch or something else from their home kitchen or a cup of coffee so we can enjoy this discussion with our CIOs. As with all of our other sessions, and especially with this one, please use the link in the chat to submit your questions. This is an open discussion with our CIOs. I'll be asking questions, so feel free to submit your question and we'll ask all the questions that we have time for. We have a few to get started with. Our questions for this discussion are based on our COVID-19 response and all of the things that decisions and challenges and opportunities that we've learned with the COVID-19 epidemic. So without further ado, I will introduce our CIOs. First of all, we have Cory Falldine from Emporia State University. We have Angela Neria from Pittsburgh State University. Hi, Angela.
Hello.
We have Dave Antonacci from the University of Kansas Medical Center. Welcome, Dave.
Hi.
We have David Miller from Wichita State University. Hi, David.
Hello.
We have Gary Pratt from Kansas State University.
Good morning, everyone.
Hi, Gary. We have Mark Griffin from Fort Hays State University. Hello, Mark.
Everybody. Hello, everybody. Thanks, ESU, for putting this on.
Thank you. And we have Mary Walsh from the University of Kansas.
Good morning.
Hi, Mary. Good morning.
Good morning.
So if we're all settled in, I'll go ahead and begin our questions. And this question is for all of you. How does the disruption caused by COVID-19 compare with other disaster recovery scenarios that you have encountered in the past? And Cory, you're smiling. Let's start with you.
Oh, I was actually going to defer to Mary or Gary or Angela, since they have all been in large scale disasters, even somewhat recently.
Well, this is Angela from Pittsburgh State, and we live very close to, Pittsburgh State's located very close to Joplin, Missouri. So we certainly were involved with and had some ripple effects from the Joplin tornado when it happened. Our disaster recovery plan is much different now than it was then. And I would say our DR plan and our planning and the experiences that we've been through prepared us very well for COVID. Frankly, and I'm literally knocking on wood while I say this, it has been really seamless from a technology standpoint and many other standpoints, but we've been very pleased with that planning and the experiences that allowed us to support our faculty and students and staff during this very strange time.
So this is Mary. Am I interrupting you, Angela? Are you done?
No, go for it.
Okay. So I wanted to jump in because I was thinking about the similarities and the differences. And our disaster was back in 2005. So I think the real pivotal point is the technology that's available now. So back in 2005, it was certainly the similarities are it has a significant financial impact, a disruption to a semester, ripple effects going forward. But the difference is in 2005, we didn't have the technology to have these face-to-face meetings, to have the interactions. I don't think anyone had to give up a semester. We just continued with online classes, and that makes a huge difference to each institution. So to me, the availability of Zoom and Teams and all the technologies that are available to do online classes has really made such a difference in as opposed to my previous experience.
Mary, why don't you share with the group what happened in 2005? Because it wasn't a KU experience you're talking about. It was something.
Oh, I didn't think of that. I'm sorry. Okay. So in 2005, I was at Tulane University in New Orleans, and Hurricane Katrina really devastated the entire city. So in that case, we had to evacuate. And I was part of the recovery team in Houston, Texas. But we lost the entire semester. We had to actually, the hurricane hit back to school weekend. So our students came on campus, dropped off their luggage, and immediately got on a bus to evacuate the city. So as a result, we didn't even have one day of class, but the impact to the institution of canceling the entire semester was, it was very impactful. Certainly the loss of tuition, having to return financial aid funding, it certainly rippled throughout subsequent semesters. And we weren't able to return to the city throughout most of 2005. So I should say that although this pandemic is very, very dire, very tragic, very impactful, I think the state of Kansas is doing a great job in containing it. And I'm very grateful that we have our homes and electricity and running water and all those things. It's very difficult working, learning, teaching remotely, but we have a lot to be grateful for also.
And this is Gary. I'll go ahead and jump in. We at Kansas State University had a significant issue back almost 2 years ago when our library caught fire. They dumped tons of water on the fire, and it ended up following gravity and creating Niagara Falls over my data center. So that was my most recent issue. The concern that or not concern, but the thing I wanted to share is most of these sessions with the CIO panels, at least the last couple of years, seem to be around disasters, because this is what we talked about last year as well. And I remember having an amazing dinner at Pittsburgh, Czech, and having to eat our dessert in the storage room in the back because of tornado sirens. You remember that, Angela?
Yes.
So I think we live and breathe this on a regular basis. So I can tell you our response to the library fire, it had a significant effect on IT and the institution, but not so much on students. We're lucky it happened a week after final grades were submitted in the spring. We really had a summer to get ready for fall term. We still had summer term. We still had orientation and enrollment and registration and things like that. But we were able to do some quick triage to get things up and running. And, you know, my mantra is never waste a good crisis. So we were able to take advantage of that to do a significant move to cloud for our data center, which I think has set us up very well in response to the current COVID-19 craziness, because most of our systems that were needed aren't on campus now. They are out in the cloud. And so we had antiquated systems before that I'm not sure would have responded as well or as easy as we have this time. So it was a heck of a big lift, and it was a major change, moving to remote learning and remote working. But I think on the technology end, it stood up. The main issues we had were with individual vendors that were kind of overwhelmed with the volume, not really an issue with our technology. So VPN was the biggest issue, and I think our biggest issue around that had to do with people not reading instructions. So I think that it really, I think IT shined, and that I think that's true across all of our institutions, not just at K-State. IT really did shine during this. It was a heavy lift, don't get me wrong, but I think that we're in a good position. The question now is, how do we pivot forward into, as we go into summer and fall, which I know is a later question, so I don't get into that here.
Well, but I would like to interject and kind of follow up with the next question. Goes along a little bit with what you were saying, Gary, is how do you address the technology barrier for students? And also, what about your faculty and staff? There were quite a few barriers telling everybody to move home and to take online classes that they weren't prepared for. How did all of you address those? Loaded question?
Sure, I'll break it into three, and then kind of how we addressed it. I would say that from a technology perspective, the two biggest upfront issues we had was internet connectivity. That was by far the biggest issue we faced with so many of our folks in rural locations, or even folks that went back to urban areas and just didn't have substantial or significant broadband contract for connectivity. And I think it's somewhat of a misnomer or a misconception that urban areas automatically have solid broadband connectivity, which isn't always the case. Number two is having a permanent solution or having their own device and having an adequate device, a laptop. It was a little bit of a, even though I think we knew it based on the surveys and the conversations we constantly have with our students, faculty, and staff, I think it was still somewhat of a shock, the number of folks that didn't have their own device and needed something to basically take home, or even being at home, not having to share that device and that connectivity again with their siblings, with their spouse. So those were two of the technology hurdles I know we faced. And then the third is a little less about the tech, so much as something Cory just mentioned, which I would say is proficiency. You know, this was a very different way of interacting with tech. For faculty, it was providing online education, the differences in the efficacy of synchronous versus asynchronous education. From a business perspective, little things like, as some of the techs on that are probably listening, one of the favorites is somebody that wanted to take a printer and a scanner home so they could print things off and write it and then scan it and then send it, as opposed to using some of the software that they already had to do those digital edits. So some of these things were just a very different way of interacting with technology they already have. And it may seem easy, but really, even in IT, we had to engage the technology differently. And it's a very different prospect to manage a meeting and you lose electricity and everybody's in the room and everybody's just kind of laughing at each other because there's no electricity, versus everybody's on a Zoom call and you lose electricity and now everybody's gone. So just learning how to use the tech and the proficiency piece, I think was very big. I know for us, we assigned hotspots for as many folks as we could that didn't have connectivity, whether they were rural or urban, which has pluses and minuses, because the hotspots sometimes do and don't work, or they have data limits, which was another interesting twist that we had to work through. And then we kind of sequestered every available laptop we could from checkouts and labs and classrooms across campus and reloaded them to get them in the hands of faculty, staff, and students, in some cases shipping them to them, which I think was somewhere in the neighborhood of course, Mel would know this better than I would on the numbers, but it was in the three figures because we're a relatively, we're D2. But those were the technology things we did to resolve the problems in the moment. And then from a proficiency perspective, we have been doing a substantial amount of training and webinars, both on the faculty side and on the staff side.
Yeah, I would say from Fort Hayes' standpoint that ours is very similar experience to ESU. I would say the biggest thing was just getting technology into the hands of everybody. Our faculty, it wasn't such a problem because we have laptops for all our faculty already, but staff members, a lot of them just had desktops. So we had to find and locate laptops and get those set up for staff members that were going to be working from home. We also had some students, actually I was surprised at how few that we had to provide laptops to, but we did have to provide laptops to a few students. And then the internet connectivity, surprisingly, we've not had a huge issue. I can't say that we didn't have any issue, because there are some, obviously, in rural areas that do not have adequate internet connectivity. But basically, we just worked with them, made suggestions, provided them contact information, And for the most part, the users took care of that themselves. And so that really wasn't too bad. Probably the biggest piece, though, was to get the training out to everybody quickly. The first, I would say, 3 weeks or so, it was unbelievable the amount of training materials that were sent out, either through email, we provided on the website, videos, lots of different things. And that was kind of the biggest thing for us. So I would say we fell very much into the same boat as ESU. But I think we rose to the occasion. I think it all went really pretty well, pretty smooth.
What are your biggest concerns heading into the summer when it comes to either technology or courses? And what about the fall?
Well, Melanie, this is Gary. I'm going to jump, first of all, to fill out the second question. I don't want to say ditto to everything that Cory and Mark said, because ditto. I mean, everything they're talking about is true of us. The only thing I thought was interesting was, besides the rural bandwidth issue, which we had a significant issue with, was the fact that people were at home with family members. And so as we were doing tech support, we were finding out the biggest issue was their kids in the other room streaming Netflix or gaming or whatever. And it really shut down their ability to do other things. So I needed to make that point because it was a unique factor that we've never had before. So now you can go on to your next question. Thank you.
No, I'm sorry if I jumped the gun on that one. We have several questions coming in too besides these, so I just want to make sure we have time for everyone's questions. So back to this, and it is one of the questions that did came in. What are some of the concerns heading into the summer? I know we have still most of our classes are online this summer. Some are going face-to-face late in the summer. And then what about the fall?
This is Dave Antonacci at KU Med. We had difficulty, of course, depopulating the campus. One advantage we have is we have most of the doctors and researchers giving us a lot of insight into what was happening with COVID at a pretty advanced level. So we started planning in late February, kind of said what would happen if COVID hit, and it was, at that time, I remember thinking, well, this is nothing but a, virus in China, and there's that one case in Washington. So turns out we did a lot of that planning, so got out of some of those difficulties. We had an advanced warning. We're starting to repopulate the campus. So this week, we brought back all of the researchers, clinical and basic science researchers, and repopulating, as difficult as depopulating is, repopulating is 10 times more difficult. How do you get the protective equipment? How do you get the training to people? How do you sanitize a computer without destroying it, with the right solutions? So a lot of that work we've done, but we just brought that group on. I guess if, these people have been working with pathogens and toxic chemicals all their professional career, they should, know what to do with protecting themselves against this. So we've learned a lot from them. But we're going to start bringing in more. We're going to start up our library probably June 1st if there's no changes in state or county. And so, lots of questions. How do you sanitize the place? How many people do you allow in? What kind of protective equipment do you need for your staff and students? So that's kind of where we're at, slowly ratcheting up and bringing people back on campus as state allows us, and we feel comfortable bringing them on board.
I think managing expectations, much to a point that Dave just made. There's an assumption, I think, in all the conversations I've been having, how technology can be used to assist in this process, and I think that's absolutely true. But I do think that every institution is a little different. Counties are different. States are different. Resource levels are different. And one interesting example that I can give is when I say managing expectations. to what degree are we going to use technology to manage some of these things? For instance, I do know of some institutions across the country that are talking about literally placing automated temperature stations at every entry point of every building. And for those institutions, they may have a very specific reason. They may be a medical institution. They may have they may have very limited entry points. But for many of our institutions, that's going to be a very difficult thing to do. And working with our administrations to find that balance between what can we do that's reasonable, what can we do that's practical, and how can we use technology that's not necessarily just doing it for show, but that's actually going to have some efficacy behind it to make a difference. And that's why I use the temperature station as an example, that it's a very cool thing, but it might not be as effective as we want it to be unless we can do something like that to the volume that we would need to make it effective. So managing expectations.
I can echo that. We're doing the same thing, trying to be prepared for throughout the summer, preparing for fall semester, anticipating both online and face-to-face. And to do that, we're looking at our classroom technology, making sure we have the right equipment in place, preparing to track population densities. I anticipate we'll have a handful this summer, even if it's just looking at classroom scheduling, making sure we have social distancing in place. Also, making sure we don't have classes starting and stopping at the exact same time. So we have a lot of students coming into the hallway at the same time. All of these things, it has legs into almost every aspect of our systems, our instructional design. We started out after spring break, taking small steps, getting our course content out, building on that, getting to best practices. So I feel like summertime, we have a pretty good foundation in place, but there's still a lot of work to do. And we're taking this as the runway, getting ready for fall. And there's still a lot of uncertainty around fall. I think everybody feels that way. We're not quite sure what to expect this fall semester.
This is Angela, and I would like to echo what Mary said. I think we even have concerns about what meetings will look like in the fall. What if we don't feel comfortable meeting in conference rooms and we are all Zooming or using Teams from our offices? So there's those possible issues that could arise network-wise, etc. Doubtful, but possible. We just don't know what's to come. So I do think that there's a lot of unique things that we're going to have to consider, but there's also things that we're not going to have a clue about. Really, ultimately, the comfort level of folks when they come back is going to require us to pivot and be fluid as we've had to be over these last few months, I believe. So I think getting back to our COOP plans and our DR plans to manage those things is critical, and remind ourselves that those things aren't cookbooks, they're guidebooks, and it's okay to pivot and be fluid in a time like this because we don't know what kinds of behaviors will arise. Another piece that I think is really critical, and I know every county is handling this different. The county that we are in, Crawford County in Southeast Kansas, requires every employee to fill out a simple little form before they go into work. And there might be other counties doing that as well. We weren't too excited about filling out a paper form and passing it around, as you can imagine. So we created an app to do that for our faculty and staff that are visiting campus, which is very few right now, but that will obviously grow. And we are working with a local development company owned and operated by 2 former alumni, and one is also an instructor at Pittsburg State University. And we've created a contact tracing app, basically, with their help and guidance. And they, along with our government relations individual at Pittsburgh State, met with both the city and the county to get approved countywide. It's not something that will be forced for folks to use. We want people to volunteer, but we're really excited and hopeful that it will help us help our community. We've had very few cases in our county, and we'd like to keep it that way when the students come back. So we're excited about that, and that will be a change for us. That will be a big change, people having to use that or volunteering to use that across our county, as well as our students using it.
This is Gary. I hate talking about something that's not technology, but I think we're all facing significant budget restrictions as a result of COVID-19, both in enrollment losses and revenue losses with, refunds on dorms and what's going to happen in the fall and, those types of things. And so I think we are all dealing with how are we going to respond to what could be significant budget cuts. What happens if the state, knowing they're not getting their tax revenues, gives us a cut on top of our revenue constraints that we have. So I hate going there, but it is it's a real thing that we're dealing with right now.
Gary, I would interrupt and say, go with it, because that is one of our questions that has just come in. So I think that's a great topic to cover. They were asking about what about the tactical approaches to the possibility of very large budget cuts. Particularly regarding staffing is another facet of the question that they're asking here. So take the ball and run with it.
Okay, not a ball I want to take and run with, but fortunately I have to. And I've had similar conversations with our all IT staff. I say all IT because not all of them report through my office, just about what we're facing. And we were asked to come up with 3 scenarios on how we would deal with budget cuts, both in a one-time and a potential recurring cut as well. And so we're looking across the board. Unfortunately, and I've found this when I came to Kansas 2.5 years ago, I came here after 5 years of budget cuts, an annual budget cut basically, and I've had a cut every year since I've been here. And now we're talking about significant beyond that. So there's no more fat to trim at, there's no more margins to cut. We actually have to look strategically at what services have the most impact and what services may we need to reduce as a result of that. We're looking at all of those types of things. The one thing about having a not quite exigency type budget thing, because we haven't actually made that statement, they're giving us an opportunity to do short-term things, meaning for fiscal year 21, that hasn't been available to us before. And then we still have to make long-term decisions if there's a recurring cut on what we would do, in future years, like fiscal year 22 and beyond. So we're trying to be as creative as we can. We're trying to affect as little as we can, but we absolutely have to consider unfortunate things like furloughs and, those types of things. I'm sure each campus is taking different approaches to that, but I think all of us are faced with it. And please, somebody else take the ball on this one.
Well, I can jump in and say, I think we're all in the same situation. We haven't determined next steps yet. I don't have any sense of numbers at this point, but I'm trying to be very transparent about it. Clearly, this will have a financial impact on all our institutions, and we're going to make every effort to respond to that. What I am focused on is, I think technology gives us a lot of options. But this will be difficult. This will be very challenging, and I'm not trying to minimize it, but we are exploring other ways to try and reduce costs. So this is just one little example that really wouldn't wouldn't help a significant budget cost, but we are exploring areas now that we've had this opportunity. You know, this might really fall under silver linings. So when we had to retreat from campus, we have quite a few student computer labs across campus with very specialized software. And of course, if the students aren't on campus, they can't use that software. So our team was very quick, very, very creative, and created virtual computer labs that had the authentication in place. And as we thought through it, we realized there's no reason going forward not to keep it virtual, that we don't have to have physical computer labs going forward, which really quite a bit of stress. Just the equipment, the traffic in the computer labs, and the space. So that's one little example that maybe we can reduce some costs in little ways. It certainly won't stand up to all of the cuts we'll have to take, but we are exploring different ways that technology can reduce things. This has been a really interesting inflection point of how we've accelerated using technology, using digital tools that would have taken us a lot longer to implement.
If it's okay, I'd like to piggyback on what Mary mentioned there. We did much the same thing. We have some VDI labs in place, especially for our heavy duty stuff out at our College of Technology. But we also use a product called Software 2 at Pittsburgh State University that allows us to package applications, and students can log in, authenticate, and download them remotely to their machines. You have to have the proper licensing in place to do that, of course, but really the only place we found that we needed to up licensing was in the Adobe licensing, which will not surprise anyone. But we were already using Software 2. We've used it for several years. We've presented with Software 2 at Czech in the past. It is a slick product and has aided us as we have begun reducing computer labs around campus because they're just flat out not used. So the notion of keeping them in place and replacing machines and keeping switches and closets for networks really makes so little sense in this day and age. Do we need some computer labs? Absolutely. Do we need everything we have? No. So I was going to talk about this in the silver lining piece, but in mid-February, we met as a department. And after reviewing our COOP and our DR plans, one of the things that we thought if we had to shut down for COVID, as we were seeing the East Coast and the West Coast shut down, was how could we extend the use of our computer labs, much like what Mary's talking about. We used lab stats, which I know many of you have, and we just went in and we looked at what's our highest used software programs through lab stats around campus in all of our labs. And if we did not have those software programs packaged, we began looking at licensing, making sure we could legally package them and put them in Software 2 so that when we did make the call to go completely online, all of those packages were there for students and faculty to take advantage of. And that has been a huge lifesaver for us. Like I said, we already had some VDI pieces in place. We added to some of those, but really those products were lifesavers if you're not using them. I know I'm giving a plug for these guys, and they need to definitely be at Czech next year if we're face-to-face and sponsor Czech. But VDI, we use Horizon stuff. Software 2 and lab stats really saved our bacon, and knowing how to use those products and keeping tabs on how they're being used across campus and understanding the data was critical. We had a team in place that already did that. So huge savings for us there and savings for our students.
One other thing that we're going to do at the Med Center is reach out to our vendors and ask them for discounts, pricing, steep discounts in FY21. I don't know how successful we'll be at that, but that's been one recommendation. And we're in multi-year agreements with some and not in others, and some we have leverage on and others we don't. But we're hopeful that even if we were to get a small percentage of those, that would help absorb some of the reductions.
So I'm sorry, go ahead, Gary.
No, nothing. I was just fiddling around.
Well, we've been talking about the changes that are making. What are the long-term effects you think that the COVID-19 response will have when it comes to information technology and higher ed?
I'll jump in. This is Gary. Again, under my mantra of never waste a good crisis, we already were starting to look at how do we start focusing on academic innovation and changing pedagogy, keeping ourselves relevant, because higher ed needs to change, and it's difficult to make that change happen. Well, this crisis has given us an opportunity to move all faculty online, even those who went kicking and screaming all the way. Was what we did a quality online program across the board? Probably not. We basically did a heavy lift of getting everybody there in a matter of a week or two. But I can tell you that, and I'll steal a term from our provost, we're pivoting forward. How do we now take the what we've done and people getting more comfortable and understanding a little bit more that it's not just a lecture that you're recording 100% live synchronously, but you actually do have technology tools that can help you change the way you offer classes. We are looking at as close to face-to-face as we can get, but we're also waiting to see how the virus toll goes over the summer. But I think that we're looking at a hybrid approach so that even if there is face-to-face, we still have online components. You know, how much can you do? Reduce the face-to-face by going 50-50, and that gives you more opportunity to do the classroom scheduling changes. I'm not sure if it was Angela or Mary mentioned that earlier, but we're looking at the same thing. If you got to have 6-foot distance in classrooms, you're not going to have the same kind of classroom scheduling you had before. If you have different start times, you're not going to have the same. So how can we take advantage of the technology to really change how people are doing pedagogy? That's exciting as heck for me because it was already on my to-do list working with academic affairs. And now I think we have an opportunity to really, really ramp up how we do this. I would love to say that we never go back to the way we were. I think we're going to go forward into a new way of being. That doesn't mean everything's online. That doesn't mean we don't have face-to-face, but it gives us the opportunity to really explore the options that are available. So I'm excited as heck about the future once we get past the current crisis.
I think it's going to dramatically increase the expectation of online services, whether that's instruction or student services. I think, you know, folks, people in general are pretty resilient, but sometimes we also need a little bit of, you know, the fear of God in us for something bad to happen, for us to see what could happen. And that has certainly been the case the past few months when we talk about our service offerings, our academic program offerings. And the longer this goes on, we can sure maintain a certain amount of temporary normal. And folks across the board, students especially, have given us, even though, forget what you read in the news for a minute, but students have given higher education an awful lot of rope the past few months, but we're not going to get that same rope in fall. Everybody gave us, you know, they said, yep, we get it. It was tough and everybody forklifted courses online and everybody's making do. But when fall rolls around or spring rolls around and they say, look, you all had 6 months to figure this out. So if we don't have our crap together and have it figured out, and that's what I think one of the, even though it's 6 months is not really long term, but I do think it is going to increase expectations. And some of the things that I've seen our student advising, our tutoring, our admissions group, our events management, they are tremendous. And they're actually getting better turnout and better communication back from students who you all know, both listening and on the CIO side. When you listen to the students, especially the Gen Zs coming up, this is what they've been asking. Not this per se, but nobody asked for this. But they have been asking for a more online supplemental communication and interaction, and we haven't, higher ed traditionally, we haven't been giving it to them. So now that they're getting a taste of it, and the faculty and staff side, especially the staff side, are seeing that some of this stuff really does work and it works well. And we can do this in parallel and supplement to face-to-face. When people start coming back in full droves, students and everybody else, they're going to expect both. They're going to expect both levels of face-to-face and online service. And I think that's a good thing. I think that higher ed has been due for a shift in a variety of different ways. And I think that this gave us that little nudge off the cliff to figure out how to build our parachute while we're falling down.
I agree, Cory. And I think, I don't know how to say this without probably insult someone, but at this place in the game, as expensive as higher ed is in the world today, we're dealing with a different population than we have in years. These folks are used to pivoting. They're used to being demanding. Their expectations are high. They've lived with technology their whole lives. We've got to take the prim and proper out of higher ed to some degree and be able to teach in a different way and to reach these students in a different way. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. It's evolution. And a lot of our faculty get it. Most of us on our campuses have been working towards this for years. We have an amazing Center for Teaching, Learning, and Technology under our academic wing that we partner with here at Pittsburg State University, and they focus on quality matters, online instruction through their e-academy. I know many others do that too, and I cannot brag enough on our faculty. I am beyond impressed with how they have handled this. And not only have they handled it, they've taken it up a notch. They just continue to ask more questions, learn more about products, ask for more products, more instruction, more help. They want to do their very best. And part of that's just being in the good old Midwest where everybody wants what's best for their students. There's no doubt about it. But I am beyond impressed with how they've embraced this. And I think it's only going to get better. I really believe that, but I don't think it will ever be the same.
I agree. Well said.
Yep. I think the bar will just continue to rise. I mean, it's been said at whatever level you want to say it is right now, but in the fall it'll raise and it will just continue to go up from there.
Thanks, Mark. We've got time for a couple more questions. This one's kind of back a little bit more. One of the questions was, how has the pandemic impacted your orientations to security posture and policy? Will future budget cuts affect the level of security for your organization?
I would say it has caused us to at least kind of re-examine some of our security policies and some of our security processes. I wouldn't say it's changed a whole lot. Of course, early on, as far as security issues, Zoom was always in question. That's kind of settled down a little bit now. But that was not really our security policy, but just making sure products that we're using, and Zoom was absolutely one of the most used products, to at least try to evaluate and find out whether the products you're using are secure and that the students and faculty can trust in them.
I'll jump in. This is Gary. Besides what Mark said, which was a big deal, and we had to respond to those, Zoom bombing and those types of things, and the significant increase in phishing attacks where people are trying to take advantage of the crisis and people's fears. One of the things that I had to deal with early on were as we moved to remote work, is people not quite understanding their need to secure data, PII data. And so they really wanted to pick up a box full of documents that had PII data, bring them to their house and bring their scanner with them so they could keep doing their work. And Pete, you've all heard me use this before. It's when CIO became a 4-letter word, because I said, Absolutely not. You're not bringing secure data home. It even happened with researchers who wanted to bring data home that falls within CUI or other types of things. And I basically put my foot down and said, you are not going to do that. We have VPN so you can access data and do work like that. But if you're talking about uploading or scanning or anything like that, we had to have people rethink where they're at and how they deal with it. So that was a scary one for me because I have no control over what happens in their home. You know, somebody's going to throw the piece of paper away if a kid needs something to draw on and pull something out of the bin, whether they're going to shred it or, you know, if they're using their personal machine to do work. I have no control over the virus and the security of that personal system. So that was a point when I started to get a very serious facial tic and had to take some hard stances. So.
So, final question. Let's go around the room. I'm going to combine a couple of these. Have you found any silver linings, or have you had any lessons learned that you could share? Or maybe they're the same thing.
I'm going to hop in because I have to jump off and get another meeting
Great,
really
Dave.
soon. Yeah, I think the biggest one is everybody had to figure out how to do web conferencing without having a technical person sit in the room and figure out how a microphone works and a headset and muting your microphone and all of that. So I think we're in better position to more campus-wide implementation of web conferencing systems. The other one I think that's kind of a big changer is we developed, or we in general, very efficient and effective systems that were also too lean and too fragile. So I think like supply chains, this, just-in-time demand, and as soon as one piece is no longer available, the whole system breaks down. And so I think we've worked really hard to remove redundancies, and sometimes those redundancies are necessary. So we had some difficulty with some of our phone lines, a lot of phone conferencing within the hospital part of the university. And we had to add new phone lines. For some people, that wasn't a big deal because they just switched to Skype or they went to Zoom or something else. And in certain instances, the hospital computers are locked down more than the university ones are, and they weren't able to go and access a lot of different systems that were there. So a very locked down system was necessary at a certain point, but kind of a diversity, wider range of options, some redundancy, I think is going to be necessary, because this is going to happen again, until we have a vaccine or we have a lot of immunity. We run the risk of a second wave occurring and having to do a re-exit. And even if we get through this one, another 5 years, something else will come up, and it may be more contagious and it may be worse than this one. So we need to think about this always in the back of our mind. We may have to do a depopulation in the future as well.
I would say one of the big things that's come out of this from us is just the trust and faith that we can have in one another now. I know as far as Fort Hays and our administration, we have not until this time really embraced working remotely. And I'm hoping that maybe because we have shined, we've done well as a university. I will rave about my IT staff. They've been fantastic. And I think that really probably goes campus wide to all the departments. And I just think that there's going to be a little bit more acceptance for letting people work from home in the future, whether there's a pandemic ongoing or not. And it may provide some opportunities to actually hire people from outside of our area. Finding people in Hays America for some of our more technological jobs can be very difficult. And this may be a silver lining for us that maybe we can go outside of our area to find those people to help us out. So I think just the trust and the faith that we have in one another being built up during this time has been fantastic.
Kind of bounce off that, I've seen an uptick in institutional focus and a general reduction in priority noise. You know, everything's priority one, nothing's priority one. We don't have quite as many priority ones right now, which has been helpful. And I think that's really institutionally, not just in IT, but it's really helped us focus. Our administrative leadership teams have come together and said, look, we as all of our institutions do, we have big strategic plans and we have so many things we're all trying to accomplish, and they get in the way of each other. But this has really helped our leadership teams bring focus to what it is we're trying to accomplish. And for IT, it's really been helping us put into practice prioritizing task and project-based management, which, you know, is really to something Mark just said. It's really less about where people are sitting and more about what they're getting done, and that has also been helpful. So again, you gotta trust the. I read something the other day that said the best way to trust someone, or the best way they found to trust someone, is to trust someone, or to decide whether or not they should trust them. And I think that a lot about our staff and our faculty across campus. You don't know if you can trust them until you try. So I think that's probably been the lesson learned, trusting a lot of our faculty and staff across campus with technology, which is hard to do. You know, we want to tighten our grip so much because we have the burden of knowledge with all the things with technology that can go wrong. But we've got to give them rope. And they, to Angela's point, they will surprise us. They will do wonderfully innovative things. And yes, will we have to come back every once in a while and clean up a mess? Of course. But I think that at least in my experience with this, it has been the minority of events that we have had to come back and clean things up. So that's been my lesson learned.
Very much. Oops, sorry, Mary.
Go ahead, Angela. I'll follow you.
I'm just going to kind of piggyback on what Cory said. I think we've probably all seen this, but our teams amaze us. They rose to the occasion and then some. I know every CIO in the country is probably feeling that way in higher ed and other areas right now, but I could not be more proud of this team. And our President's Council has done a great job of doting on them and making sure that they're appreciated, which is a great feeling, because in the background, when you're making things work, you don't know, people don't always know you're back there making things work. So this has been great. But I do want to kind of piggyback on what Cory said on the innovation piece. I think for me, the new and unexpected partnerships that have risen out of this have really led to some awesome innovation that I think will carry forward if we ever get back to what feels like somewhat of a normal life and a normal workplace. And that's been a huge silver lining for me. I think of our university as being very innovative anyway, but there's been extra steps and extra partnerships, unique partnerships that are both university and outside entities. And I don't know, it's been fun. It's made, IT is always fun because you never know what's going to happen. And there's change all the time. But you know, as hard as this whole thing has been and as sad as it has been for many, many people, it's been fun to see people really stretch and push themselves and their team along with them. So that's been a neat silver lining for us.
So I can jump in and echo the same sentiments. It's interesting how we all seem to be having this similar experience, if not identical experiences. But certainly our IT team have been so creative and so just ingenious at working with our community. And these are the times, this sort of reflects my previous experience. You really build lifelong relationships in difficult circumstances like this. So our team has been amazing, and it's certainly been acknowledged throughout the community, but it's also opened up new relationships with the adoption of these digital tools so accelerated. We value our partnerships on campus, and we work hard to have strong partnerships, but it's really opened up new relationships we hadn't had before. And that's both internally, certainly teaching and learning. We have new opportunities to bring technology solutions there. And it's really been challenging, but it's wonderful in that way. And I can't end without expressing my thanks to Mark at Fort Hays. He helped us out. We have some students in China, and we're having a lot of difficulty in reaching out to them because of certain restrictions with VPN in China. And Fort Hays jumped in and really gave us so much information and helped us navigate that. So it's everywhere. We have these great relationships. And I do want to thank you, Mark. That was so helpful.
You are welcome. We're happy to help out, and hopefully we'll be able to work together on some more stuff just like that.
Yeah, it was fun.
David or Gary, go ahead.
This is Gary. Oh, go ahead, David.
Oh, sorry. For folks who may not know my background, I'm actually the university's budget director, and I've been serving for the last 3 months as the interim CIO, and the timing certainly could not have been better to try and serve in both roles at the same time. And I'm certainly not as qualified to speak on a lot of these topics as the rest of the panel, but I did just want to outline in the sense of a silver lining that from the perspective of someone who often looks from the outside at IT, I wanted to echo what Gary said at the very beginning. That is that on our campus, IT definitely shined. And I don't know how it is on your guys' campuses. It's not unusual for IT to sometimes be beat up a little bit. And, I myself occasionally have been critical of IT also, but I think two things really came out of it for our campus. One is people really understand the value of IT now more than what they did before, and the core function that it serves for the institution, as well as just that IT is capable and able to rise to the occasion.
Parting shots, Gary?
Yeah, I will, besides saying ditto, because everything everybody said applies to us. People say things like, at K-State, one of our taglines, is we're family, K-State family. And, you always kind of just shrug and laugh and, say, yeah, that's us. But I can tell you, it's true, and it's very unique. I've had experience at 3 other institutions before I came to K-State, over 30 years. And I can tell you that, especially in response to crises like the library, fire, data center crisis, and this one, I have never been in an institution where the team, and I'm counting not just ITS, but extended IT units and business folks across the campus, truly come together and work together to really raise the bar on what we do and how we do it. I've just been amazed at that. And now that I'm hearing the rest of my colleagues speak, it is really a positive thing for me to hear that, because maybe it's more of a Midwest thing than just a K-State thing. Because I can tell you, at my last institution, we would have spent as much energy as we spent dealing with the crisis, but it would have been spent laying blame and trying to push it off on somebody else as to who's responsible. Not here. Here, everybody steps up. Everybody moves forward. So my last silver lining thing I wanted to share with folks is, even though the store shelves were empty for a few weeks, I actually found electronic shears. So I learned how to cut my own hair. So it
looks awesome, Gary.
I mean, I'm not used to being on camera, but I get to show it off finally.
It looks great. And thank you all so much for coming. I really appreciate it. And I know our audience did. We had over 100 people watching at different times. So I really thank you all very much, and enjoy the rest of the conference.